Oh boy, we're back and we're in my favorite plane, the Mirage 2000. Look at this hack and a fraud. He's playing a Mirage 2000 in a down tier for like the second video in a row. Like, why doesn't he play something interesting like the FW190A1 in a full up tier? It's because the Mirage 2000 is pretty cool and people want to watch jet things. But also, like, I put out some information that I think should be corrected because overall, I said, like, I didn't think that this plane was going to be as overpowered as it is, but actually it is. And looking at the team composition and whatnot, like, a lot of people are playing this thing, and with the way that it is, with the way that things are, this thing is like an aspen tree. You can tell that it is because of the way that it is. And this thing is kind of overpowered, and why is that? And the answer is really kind of actually pretty simple, and this is a question of ergonomics versus performance. And this is a topic that I touched on when I was when I was an AirRB player, and the way that I like used to phrase it as an AirRB player is like, yes, there are planes that can be not as good on paper, but because of the way that they respond to the controls and because of how kind of intuitive they are to use, they end up hitting a whole entire weight class above what you think they should do. The F7F was like a perfect example of this. Like, that is a plane that, like, in AirRB, like, kind of sucks. Performance-wise, it's kind of mid, but because it has a ginormous amount of guns and pretty good mouse aim controls, like, it means that it points really good. In Sim, I think the ergonomics aspect is that the Mirage 2000, which is on paper, could be defeated by the F14 because of the bigger rate number, and I also think that's a flaw with, like, sim players. Like, it's really tempting to just look at a rate number on a chart and just assume that you're going to win the dogfight that way, when there is a lot more nuance in sim as far as I'm concerned. Because what I have learned is the Mirage 2000 on paper, kind of rate-wise, is kind of meh. On the other hand, because of the really, really stupid radius and the really, really stupid intuitive controls and the ability to just kind of cut into people, it ends up hitting a whole entire class above what you think it should, or at least against most people. It doesn't mean that it is impossible to rate around this thing, but it means that if you are a raider person and you want to rate, this thing can always put up a fight in a way that can be incredibly annoying. And to kind of prove the point, and to kind of get like a litmus test of like where the US player base is, like, I ended up going against like two guys from the last game, and they wanted to 1v1. Now, I asked them because I want to know what to expect of the average player, because it's really easy for me to sit here and say that yes, the F14 should win the dogfight against the Mirage 2000, but we really need to like take the time and kind of like suss out how close it actually is in practice. In practice, I think the Mirage 2000 is better. I think in practice, it's really easy to say that US players are bad, and that's why the Mirage 2000 is better. But looking across the board, looking at a bunch of friends on my friends list, people that have played for like a long time, people that have been playing sim longer than I have, on average, their kill-to-death ratio in the Mirage 2000 is a good chunk better than the F14. And this also mimics my experience, because in my experience, the F14 is good in limited circumstances, but it also requires a lot of discipline to play. You can't just fly it into the middle of the map and just decide, fuck it, we ball. At the same time, the Mirage 2000 is kind of almost the epitome of that. Although I would argue that the Mirage 2000 is kind of like the opposite end of the spectrum of the Gripen. Like, if the Gripen is, quote-unquote, your brain-dead two-circle fighter, this is your, quote-unquote, brain-dead one-circle fighter. Like, you just pull in really hard to a guy, and a lot of the times you just kind of sort of win. Like, I have played this plane against F-16s, I played it against F-14s, I played it against kind of like everything. Like, I played it when it was stuck into top-tier matchmaker, and I didn't really feel bad playing against F-16s. Like, if this plane had a 6-missile Magic 2 loadout, I would feel perfectly fine at top tier. And this goes especially well for the Mirage 2000 with HMD, which is identical in performance but has HMD. I might actually be lying there, because I know at least one of the Mirage 2000s still sits at top tier, but I think there's one that's like just back into this bracket that has HMD, but do not quote me on that. I am not 100% sure. I don't have it yet, and I can't keep track of having 16 versions of the exact same plane with like a slightly different setup. Like, I just can't do it. I can't do it off the top of my head. But what this means for like the Mirage 2000, the CS4, the CS5, is that in down tier days, you're going to see this thing all over the fucking place. And in order to fight it, even if you're like reasonably good, you're going to feel like you need a PhD in energy maneuverability theory to really feel like you have a chance. And that doesn't go into the kind of randomness of the missile quality, the situational awareness, the fact that like the F-14 runs the fucking heat of the sun and just attracts IR missiles like nobody's business. At the same time, the thing's really easy to recognize. It's really easy to spot. It has this really fat black trail behind it that on paper, yeah, the F-14 is really, really good. In reality, to take advantage of all of the nuances of the F-14 flight model does require a lot of like very deliberate setup, and it requires a lot of like very deliberate effort. Whereas like the Mirage 2000 is just like extremely intuitive. Like, it means that on average, if you have more experience in either plane, the Mirage 2000 is going to come out on top, at least to a certain extent. Now, once you get to like the point of like, there's some people that have like years of experience. Like Shezarade will probably pretty consistently beat me in F-14 versus Mirage 2000. I don't think that is what we should consider as typical. I don't think that it should be normal to consider 10 years of simulator battles experience as like the realistic expectation for what an average player can do. Because like WarThunder's kind of whole shtick is being accessible. And all of this ranting isn't to say that I think that the F-14 sucks, because I think that the F-14 has a lot of potential. Like, it is one of the flight models that I think that would reward a lot of effort being put into actually mastering, because that flight model is actually really insane. It's one of the best rating flight models in the game with an extremely ridiculous amount of like ability to just pull AOA. But to try to figure out how to balance the difference between the two and do them correctly, and then do it in manual controls mode in a way that like you can actually hit the shot, that is a lot of effort, and that is an amount of effort that I do not expect the average person to come back from work that wants to hop onto WarThunder Sim to actually make. And even with that assessment, I'm still conceding to very conventional wisdom that the most important factor in a dogfight is sustained turn rate. And because of the way that they are tested, I don't know that that is to be the case, because the Mirage 2000 does have a better power to weight ratio than the F-14, and I think that's something that it can utilize. But trying to articulate that on a chart in a way that is very consistent into like a very consistent trajectory, that is a hard case to make, and that's not something I'm going to make right now today. It's just something I don't really know. With that being said, in the Mirage 2000, I don't actually feel bad fighting F-16s in this thing. Like, as far as flight model to flight model goes, they're kind of opposite sides of the coin, but it also means that because of the asymmetry, that the Mirage 2000 doesn't feel all that bad, and you can recognize when the F-16 pulls too hard that you can just kind of pull into it. And I haven't really had a problem with F-16s, even though on paper it is a better plane. Now, if you put someone who's like as experienced as I am, who has put as much thought into this as I have, I think the F-16 wins every time. I think the F-16 wins in a way that's like pretty easy and pretty conventional, because the F-16 flight model, for all intents and purposes, especially the A model, can kind of do like 97% of the AOA stuff that this thing can do, as far as like the quote-unquote the one circle, while also being better in the two circle. So you're just kind of like, it can force you to cope, but the number of players that can actually do that on a consistent basis is actually very small. Like right here, I'm actually trying to use his energy retention against him. As he comes in here for a shot, as he misses, I dump the missiles, I go to manual controls, and in this low-speed fight, I actually do have what I think is a fairly substantial advantage. Unless he goes into full manual controls, in this position right here, I can just lead pursuit him and pull into them. And this is like where the Mirage 2000 is really, really good. This is where it's really, really not necessarily underestimated, but it's hard to get out of this. It's hard to accelerate back to 600 kilometers per hour or 400 knots or whatever it is to then go all the way around the other side of the circle to right behind this thing. And it means that this plane is really, really good at punishing literally any kind of mistake, which means I really, really, like, I love this flight model. Like, this flight model is so fucking cool. It's a triangle. It's badass as fuck. But at 11.7, in random battles against random players, against people that are newer into the learning curve, it's not actually fun. Because the way that I like to play is not necessarily balance. Like, I'm not going to, like, go 50-50 with, like, literally everyone. But the way that I play, I want other people to have a chance. And if I'm playing this thing against the F-14A, for the most part, most people don't. And that is rather unfortunate. And then against the F-16, like, this dude's brand new. He had a good shot there. He had, like, one good shot. He missed the shot, and then he did the flat spin thing. And he had, like, another good opportunity. And, like, these guys are brand new. Like, these guys don't have a lot of experience. And they're learning that quickly. Like, it's not an issue of, like, U.S. players are inherently stupid. It is an issue of some of their planes are kind of a pain in the fucking ass to use. And I think the F-14 is kind of like a perfect example of this. Because in order to use it correctly, you have to manually sweep the wings. You also have to manually control it. Also, you can manually control it too hard, where you AOA too hard, and you have really, really funny AOA for like 0.2 seconds. And if you don't rate with it correctly, you're kind of screwed. But even if you rate at the correct speed, if you don't go in the correct direction because you're making a really big circle, you can also very easily get screwed. Whereas with this thing, at least for me, I end up feeling kind of invincible. I feel that everything about this plane, when you add it all together, this is a plane that the sum of the parts is greater than the whole. Because on paper, it is very easy to outrate and out-energy this thing. In practice, that ends up being a lot harder. And it means that when experienced players spam the shit out of this thing, especially at 11.7 down, where your average player is either an F4S or an F14 or something in between, this thing is absolutely positively busted as fuck.